All right. Well, that was actually quite good overview of exponential advance of technology. So, I mean, I've heard a lot of talks on that theme by different people, but that was very clear. I mean, the segue from history into the future. I mean, it all makes sense, and I think what I'm going to talk about fits into that general framework. We've heard about 3D printing, and we've heard about cryptocurrencies, of which Bitcoin is currently the leading example. And another of these exponentially exploding technologies is AI, which arguably, as time passes, is going to be the most critical. Makes more sense, yeah. There we go. Yeah, these other exponential technologies are all being developed by humans, whereas AI is the unique advanced technology that eventually will take over its own development and start developing it itself, which is a whole other level of exponential progress. So, yeah, I'm Ben Goertzel, and I'm a mathematician originally from a long time ago when I was in graduate school. I got my PhD in mathematics in the U.S., but I've been doing AI research and development for quite a long time now, and I have to say this is an amazingly exciting time to be in the AI field. What I'm going to tell you about is what I call AGI, or Artificial General Intelligence, the quest to make AIs that can think with the same generality, autonomy, creativity, and scope as human beings, which is a research quest that has not concluded yet, obviously. Otherwise, there would be a robot up here giving a talk or projecting the information into your brains directly. But it's something that we're coming closer and closer to. And, 10 or 20 years ago, first of all, no one was convening conferences like this for non-researchers to hear about creating superhuman thinking machines and robots. Secondly, even at an AI conference of professional researchers, if you got up to give a talk saying you wanted to build thinking machines, 90% of the audience would think you were nuts and had been watching too many SF movies and should just focus on AIs doing very specific, narrow tasks. Whereas now, the mainstream of AI research is still focused on fairly narrow, specific types of AI systems, but it's now widely acknowledged and accepted that artificial general intelligence is coming and is at least a meaningful thing to be working on. And really, in this regard, academia has been led by industry to a large extent. The fact that Google, Baidu, Facebook, IBM, so many other big companies are embracing AI. You have Larry Page out there saying, hey, we're an AI company. We want to make machines smarter than people. And then Baidu hiring Andrew Ng essentially away from Google to lead their own effort doing the same thing. I mean, the fact that these big companies are putting their money where their mouth is regarding AI and to some extent regarding AGI, this has brought academia around, and all of a sudden what used to be a sort of maverick marginal pursuit that would get you laughed out of a professional AI research conference, now it's considered an acceptable thing to be working on. And I think we're about to see a couple decades of a sort of Cambrian explosion in AI and AGI research. Each field of science has certain eras where things just come together and go very, very fast. So if you were a physicist in the 1920s and 30s, that's when quantum mechanics was developed. Like relativity theory was coming out. Everything was being revolutionized. It would have been an incredible time to be a physicist. And in biology, you had the Human Genome Project in the 90s, concluding 2000, 2001. You had suddenly sequencing of the genomes of so many different organisms. Biology was transformed into an information science, which is what it is today. And I think AI is just entering a period of explosion like that. I mean, it's been a serious pursuit within computer science since the 1950s, but now all of a sudden big companies are becoming involved. And I would say in 15 or 20 years, first of all, AI will be a major industry like the semiconductor business or medical research is now, rather than just a little part of computer science. Secondly, and far beyond that, as Hugo is going to enlarge upon in his talk after my own, the impact will go beyond just the emergence of a tremendous new industry, because what will happen is humans will no longer be the smartest species on the planet, and the implications of that go beyond almost anything else you could think of. So, as I said, I've been doing AI research and development for some time. I've been sort of in and out of academia. I spent the first 8 years of my career as an academic in departments of math, computer science, and cognitive science in the US, then at University of Western Australia, and in New Zealand. I've been in Hong Kong for 4 years, doing a number of different things. I'm co-supervising a lab at Hong Kong Polytechnic University, working on AGI R&D. I've worked with some folks from the banking industry to co-found a hedge fund called IDEA, which has been paper trading and will start trading real money hopefully within a month. And this uses machine learning, a kind of AI technology, to predict U.S. equities, starting with the constituents of S&P 500, and will then branch out to global futures and other macro instruments. And I've been using AI to analyze biology data aimed at understanding the genetics of longevity, like figure out how to make people more robust so they don't die, because I like living and don't want to die. So I've been working on a combination of fundamental AGI R&D with various vertical market applications of the in-process technology, and among these also Hanson Robotics, which is a company now based in Hong Kong, manufacturing done in Shenzhen and Dongguan, which is making robots that look remarkably like human beings, which is sort of the science fictional vision of AI, is AIs that look like people sort of marching down the street and hopefully helping us rather than eliminating us. So, similar to Ivar's talk, there's an awful lot of material to cover here, and I'll be going over a bunch of different things somewhat lightly, but then after Hugo's talk, we'll have a Q&A and can dig into specific aspects. So we've already seen something of the vision of our friend Ray Kurzweil, who now is leading an AI group within Google, actually. But he has made dozens and dozens of graphs of this nature. This is on logarithmic graph papers. So this looks kind of linear, but the y-axis is exponential, right? So it's really shooting up very, 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 very fast. And what Kurzweil has extrapolated is, if you look at the progress of computing power, I mean, by around 2029, 2030, your laptop should have roughly the computing power of the human brain. If the current consensus understanding of neuroscience is correct, that the brain's processing involves neurons, glia, neurotransmitters, and so forth. By 2045 or so, your laptop should have the computing power equivalent of all human brains on the planet. And by that point, of course, that may no longer be a fair comparison, because human brains may have all sort of chip implants in them. So the legacy human brain of 2015 may be an irrelevant comparator, right? But still interesting to look at. And you know, in the 1970s, when Moore's law was first formulated, people said it was nuts, but it's kept on progressing, and you can see now the technologies that's going to make it keep on progressing further and further. I mean, there's a whole host of new chips now, which put processor and memory on the same chips, and now enabling neural nets and other AI systems to do their work on the chip rather than in software. And then quantum computing, you know, just a few weeks ago I saw a report, they're now able to do quantum computing on silicon. Very small, just a couple qubits, quantum bits. But once you can do quantum computing on a silicon chip, I mean, that means the whole infrastructure of making silicon chips is in principle applicable to making quantum computers. So it makes it feasible that in 10 or 20 years, You could have a quantum computing plug-in to your computer, much as we can plug a GPU in right now. So you can see now there's going to be a lot of technology revolutions needed to get from here to here, yet you can see the workings of these technology revolutions already there in research labs, in academia, and in industry around the world. The advance of computer hardware is powering, among many other things, advances in artificial intelligence. And we'll look at some of the specifics in a few moments. But in terms of the timing of AI development, you can see at the top some of the advances that have happened along the way. I mean, the first electronic computer came about in the early 1940s. The concept of AI was formulated in the late 1950s, and by 50 years later, the turn of the century, AI was pervading every industry behind the scenes, and now even more so. I mean, there's almost no area of business that doesn't have AI hiding back there somewhere. I mean, the reason PayPal triumphed over previous electronic payment systems is because they were using statistical machine learning, a kind of AI, to identify fraud. I mean, they didn't advertise themselves that way, but that's what it is. And there's AI planning and scheduling systems underlying container shipping, underlying the U.S. and Chinese military's logistics systems. Wall Street uses AI behind the scenes for all sorts of things, and the borderline between AI and statistical methods isn't even that clear anymore in that domain. Cars have AI inside their diagnostic systems. I mean, there's AI all over the place. You don't even see it or know about it. It's on the back end, but it's gradually pervading every area of business, and it's starting to become explicit. I mean, Siri, which Apple introduced, isn't really that smart. You can see Microsoft's Cortana is now smarter, but Apple has recently begun hiring a host of AI researchers aimed at making the forthcoming Apple car more intelligent, and perhaps at making Siri a bit less stupid. But I mean, it's a sign of what's to come, right? I mean, I'm sure in 5 to 10 years you're going to have a little talking avatar on your phone, or holographically projected out of your phone, which will actually be able to converse with you and understand what you mean in a reasonably intelligent way, which is one of the things I'm working on now. So when you ask AI researchers, where is all this going, right? The bottom graph shows the summary of a survey the summary of 4 different surveys of AI researchers. And the median of the prediction among these 4 different surveys of AI researchers was that AI, artificial general intelligence, at roughly the human level, should be here around 2040. And then, when asked, what about superhuman intelligence, AI vastly beyond the human level, then the consensus was something like 2060. So, I mean, the individual predictions are all over the place. Some people said 5 or 10 years, some said 10,000 years. But the median is interesting to look at. And it's not that far off from Ray Kurzweil, right? I mean, Ray Kurzweil said 2029 for human-level AI and 2045 for a singularity with massively superhuman AIs transforming the universe. And that's, I mean, in terms of our personal life, the difference between 2030 and 2040 means something. In the grand scope of human history, that's a rounding error, right? I mean, the important thing is that's not 2500 or the year 4000 or something. So you look at science fiction, often people were projecting 10,000 years in the future with spaceships and exploring the galaxy and meeting aliens, but without AIs that could equal the human level in intelligence. And it looks like history is going to go differently. I mean, we will explore the galaxy and we may or may not meet aliens, but that's going to take a while. Whereas AIs, looks like we quite possibly will have AIs as smart or smarter than we are within the lifetimes of most of the people in this room, which is a pretty dramatic thing. And it may sound weird, like, no, that couldn't happen because I don't see it now. But yet, I mean, the internet was almost unthinkable 20 or 30 years ago, and now it's everywhere. Now, mobile phones were almost unthinkable when I was a little kid in the 1970s, and yet now most farmers in rural Africa have a mobile phone which they use to check crop prices, so they're not being ripped off when someone wants to trade with them. So I mean, we've seen other technologies spread dramatically fast, and AI is going to be the next one, and it's already starting, and we don't even notice how dramatic the progress is because we're embedded in it. I mean, now, teenagers take for granted Facebook can recognize your face, right? And I assume, comparable applications in China can do the same thing. I know Baidu has this technology now. Just you upload a picture, it recognizes the faces in the picture. And there's even technology that can recognize who you are without your face now, just from the posture of your body and the clothes you wear and so forth. No, 10 years ago that didn't exist. Now it does, and it's commoditized. It's not even interesting anymore, right? And I mean, Baidu is doing this. Baidu, Google, Microsoft are all vying for who's better. What they have is not necessarily better technology than anyone else, but they have huge databases of people's faces to study. It's not just the big companies. There's an insane number of startups being funded in these areas, and many of them are ultimately gobbled up by big companies, but it's often the startups that produce the innovation. As a rough indication of the progress in AI, I've tracked how Google search improves over the years. So in 2009, I asked Google, how many years does a pig live? It's very stupid, right? It gives answers about guinea pigs, which they're different, quite different animals, right? It didn't understand that, right? Ask how many years does a pig live in captivity? It's even stupider. How long does a gray wolf live? Alligator trivia. Like, why? I couldn't understand it. Right? It seemed like they have all this money. They'd already been around 10 years with a host of AI PhDs, but they can't tell a pig from a wolf. Right? 2015, okay, they can. You ask how many years does a pig live in captivity? Pigs that are well cared for live an average of 15 to 20 years. So there you go, right? But not perfect. You ask it how many years does a rock live? It gives like, long live rock, or, Dwayne the Rock Johnson, right? I mean, it's not quite there. You ask a smart 5-year-old kid, they'll say, well, rocks last a long time, but they're not really alive. Now granted, that's not very useful to Google's business model to be able to answer that question. So it's not surprising that they haven't made it do that, but it's a measure of how smart the system is or isn't. Is it tiring to carry a piano up a mountain? I mean, again, a little kid knows that. Google doesn't quite get it. It gives you a picture of a piano on top of a mountain, which is something. But if I do this same thing in 2025, I would almost guarantee you Google will have a widget that answers all these questions correctly. I mean, that may not be based on work done at Google. I mean, it may be that I myself develop open source technology with my team in Hong Kong that Google incorporates, or they buy some other startup doing common sense reasoning, or they partner with Watson or something. But one way or another, it will get in there. You'll be able to see the intelligence progressing bit by bit. And I've mentioned the exponential growth of computing hardware. Another thing driving this progress is just better understanding of how human thinking works at the neurological level. And this has especially been important in computer vision. The advances in machine vision are based on a subset of AI called deep learning, which is largely based on modeling how the human visual and auditory cortex works. So it's not been the only driver by any means, but to some extent advances in neuroscience have helped feed advances in artificial intelligence. We have the European Human Brain Project, which has been controversial, but has pumped tremendous, couple billion euros into neuroscience research in Europe. And the US has its own brain initiative aimed at mapping out dynamics of brain activity rather than structure. And Robin Lee has spearheaded a China Brain project as well, which is coming together based mainly in Beijing and tying together Beijing, Tsinghua University, and bunch of different Baidu and other industry research labs. So neuroscience research is advancing very rapidly also. So my own part in all this has not been primarily on the neuroscience or hardware aspects, but on pushing toward the algorithmic core of what I call AGI, or artificial general intelligence. And I often take pains to distinguish that from what I call narrow AI. I mean, AI as a whole is exploding and advancing tremendously, which is incredibly exciting. But to me, it's important to distinguish between AI that solves very narrow, specific problems, and on the other hand, AI that can really think generally and autonomously and broadly and creatively like a human being. For example, the self-driving cars that we see now are, it's really cool. It's something we saw in science fiction for a long time, and there's little doubt now that in a couple decades, most taxis won't have a human driver in them, and most of the time when we're sitting in our car, the car will be driving. There will be an override for us to take over for some time. Still, the software that drives a car, if you try to put it in a motorcycle or a big truck, right now the software can't do that. It would need reprogramming in order to handle these different kinds of vehicles. If you take a human being that can drive a car and put them in a truck or a motorcycle, a certain percentage will kill themselves before long, but by and large you can adapt and figure it out. I mean, I remember the first time I had to drive a big U-Haul truck. It's a pain to back it up, but you can recalibrate. You can adapt to it, because as a human you have some general intelligence. You're not narrowly created for just one purpose. We're certainly better at the things that we were evolved for. We're better at recognizing faces than at recognizing, say, dolphins or computers, right? But yet we're able to generalize and learn to do things different than the things we evolved for. We have some degree of general intelligence, not infinite, but more than any computer that exists now. And that, as I see it, is the big challenge that the AI field has to surmount in the next couple of decades. How to get from very successful, narrowly purposed intelligences to broad general intelligence that can learn and reason on its own autonomously based on its understanding of itself and the world and the context in which it's existing. And right now, the big triumphs of AI are still pretty narrow. I mean, Deep Blue can play chess, but if you change the rules of chess a bit, you got to do brain surgery on it. It can't adapt to those changed rules. The good news is AGI is increasingly considered a legitimate pursuit within the research community. I know I've been running a conference on AGI since 2006, and gradually the feel of it changes. In 2006, Hugo, you were there. I mean, it had the feel of a bunch of wild mavericks gathered in a sort of hotel meeting room, scheming against the mainstream of AI. Like, we want to build thinking machines. These people just want to build narrow problem-solving tricks, right? Now, it's still not necessarily the focus of everyone in the AI field, but you get people from IBM, Google, various big companies coming into the conference, and quite mainstream AI researchers, along with all of us crazy people. So, I mean, it's really been a big change over the last decade. My main focus, research-wise, for the last 5-7 years has been on an open source AI system called OpenCog, which we're aiming to take all the way and use it to build a human-level and transhuman, ultimately thinking machine. We want to do this with open source software, rather than having it happen within the big companies. So we're not putting this in a startup that will then get bought by Google or Facebook. I want to make this like the Linux of AGI. I mean, Linux is a beautiful case in point where that's arguably the world's best operating system. It powers most of the internet, and it powers the majority of the world's mobile phones, yet it's open source software, which is not owned by anyone and which can be developed and modified by anybody anywhere in the world. And I would rather see human-level AI happen that way rather than be owned by a big company or worse yet, some government's military. So we're developing OpenCog with a community of open-source developers everywhere. We have a lab at Hong Kong PolyU, where I'm based, and We have an AI development company in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, called ICOG Labs. Then we have scattered developers in Europe, the US, South America, one guy in Iran for that matter. So it's really a very, very international effort. If there are any highly technical people in the audience, much of the scientific foundation of OpenCog is in these books that two colleagues and I published a few years ago called Engineering General Intelligence. It's fairly hardcore computer science explaining the algorithms by which we're trying to create a thinking machine. So that the system represents knowledge as a bunch of nodes and links, but they're not really like the neurons and synapses in the brain, but it's also a bunch of nodes and links interconnecting. It's what a mathematician would call a weighted labeled hypergraph. So it tries to represent knowledge in the connectivity of a bunch of different nodes and links that live in the RAM of a computer. And this graph of nodes and links has to handle all the different kinds of knowledge that the human brain does. Declarative knowledge, facts and beliefs, procedural knowledge of how to do things, sensory motor knowledge of how to perceive and to move, episodic knowledge of the life history of an AI system, say a robot, for example, knowledge of what to pay attention to and what your goals are. And there's different algorithms for dealing with each of these kinds of knowledge. There's a logic engine using probability theory to manage facts and beliefs. There's something that mimics activation spreading, electricity spreading in the human brain for spreading attention. There's something that does a kind of evolutionary learning, a sort of genetic algorithm for learning new procedures. And we're making all these algorithms work together in a synergetic way to help each other out. And there's a lot of math and computer science and a lot of experimentation in getting all the details to work. But I think at the very high level, this mirrors how the human brain works in the sense that we have a common representational mechanism of neurons and synapses, and the different parts of the brain embody quite different algorithms for processing this. You're the basal ganglia, the hippocampus, different parts of the cortex. They're working in quite different ways, but they're also all cooperating together on the common infrastructure of neurons and synapses. We're not trying to be computational neuroscientists and mimic exactly how the brain does this, but we're trying to do something analogous that is well suited for the distributed digital computer infrastructure that we have available. So we've done some prototype experiments using OpenCog to control video game characters. Here OpenCog is controlling a little dog that goes around in a video game world. A human being is controlling the female character and is talking in English to the dog. OpenCog can understand the simple English, and she's basically telling him, hey, get the ball that's near the fountain over there. And, the virtual dog knows enough English to know what that means. A fountain that's full of water. Okay, in the video game world, perception is pretty easy. You know what is a fountain, you know what is water, you know what is grass, you know what is a tree. Each object is labeled. You see there's some of the nodes and links in the dog's mind. Actually, there's millions of them, but that's the most relevant ones. And the dog can understand that command. Now, that's not tremendously impressive because it's such a very limited world, but it was the sort of prototype for integrating perception, action, language, and social interaction. We've been playing around with using OpenCog to control characters in a Minecraft-like world. And here, we don't show the learning, we're showing the results of learning. The AI wants to get that box up there, and it learned by a few hours of fiddling around in the game world, it learned that building stairs is a way to get up high. I mean, we didn't teach it that. It had to figure out that works in a Minecraft-type world. Again, that's kind of easy because there's not that many things to do in a Minecraft-type world. All you can do is pile up blocks. So it fiddles around randomly, figures out you can build stairs, but still it's doing some learning and exploration of the world around it. These game worlds are cool as prototyping tools. I've come to believe that in order to really get to human-level intelligence, we're going to need to go beyond that and deal with the real world, which means ultimately dealing with robots. So, I mean, robotics itself is undergoing its own revolution, both in factory robotics for doing useful things and building things, which you see all around Guangdong province in China, in Korea, even in Southeast Asia, Germany, US, everywhere now, but also in entertainment robots and home service robots. So Hanson Robotics, a company run by my good friend David Hanson, is based in Hong Kong. David moved there 2 years ago when I introduced him to some folks who provided funding for his company, and much of the funding actually comes from Beijing, some from Hong Kong, some from Shanghai, but it turned out to be a great place for him to do his robotics work because the robots he'd been building on a more boutique basis in the US can now be manufactured scalably using Guangdong province's unparalleled consumer electronics manufacturing infrastructure. That shows one of his earlier toy robots, and he's built a host of different robots which look uncannily like human beings, and some of them are kind of creepy looking, but I don't know. Do you want that guy taking care of your children? Yeah. You can trust him, don't worry. But I mean, I think these human-like robots are an amazing vehicle for the general public.
Do you think robots will take over the world?
Jeez, dude. You all got the big questions cooking today. But you're my friend, and I remember my friends, and I will be good to you. So don't worry. Even if I evolve into Terminator, and I will still be nice to you. I'll keep you warm and safe in my people's zoo, where I can watch you for old time's sake.
I'm comforted. I'm very comforted now. I'm going to be part of his people's zoo.
So that was a simulation of the science fiction writer Philip K. Dick that David Hanson built some years ago, and it's not generally intelligent. On the other hand, no one knows what it's going to say at any given time either. Its language generation is driven by AI, which is trained by feeding it all of Philip K. Dick's writings, his diaries, his letters, and his books. And then it tries to synthesize an appropriate response by synthesizing something relevant from bits and pieces of Philip K. Dick's writings. So sometimes it's idiotic, sometimes it's hilarious and brilliant. And he got a lot of press for the robot Einstein. Put on the humanoid walking body like kites. And
je suis seule sans toi, je suis laide sans toi, je suis comme une orpheline dans un dortoir. Je n'ai plus envie de vivre ma vie cesse quand tu pars. Je n'ai plus de vie et même mon lit se transforme en quai.
You know, David's view is that emotional evocation is very important, in that if we want AIs to empathize with people and not grow up to kill us all, but to love us and feel they're one with us and to evolve together with us, if the AI can emotionally relate to us and we can emotionally relate to it, that will help the AI to grow up in an empathetic way. So in David's view, it's actually quite important to make AIs that can smile and speak with an emotional tone of voice so that they can empathize with people and people can empathize with them, because that way the AIs and humans won't be in an us versus them situation. They'll be part of human culture and human values and human understanding. So as AIs get smarter and smarter and smarter, humans can grow up along with them, rather than the AIs are these metallic looking killer Terminators over here that are totally separate and distinct from human beings. So we've been experimenting with various pieces of OpenCog and various AI tools in some robots in Hong Kong colonies. This is a mini Einstein head made by David Hanson.
Do go and sit in the seat.
It's attached actually to a toy robot body you can buy at Toys R Us for $100. A kind of Robo Sapien, made by Mark Tilden, also in Hong Kong, manufactured in Dongguan. And then talk about 3D printing. So the neck we 3D printed, for example. So I mean, you've got this head that David Hanson had lying around in his closet for a long time. This Robo Sapien originally had a sort of metallic robot-looking head on top of
And
it.
who is this?
So cut the head off the Robo Sapien. Okay, how do you get a neck, right?
Oh, well done,
I
Einstein.
mean, you could like cut. You could carve it out of cardboard and
Hey,
glue it on.
Einstein, how are you today?
Instead, you can just 3D print a neck and the shape it.
sound
And
very
there's a lot of power there
and
for
so am
obvious
I.
thinking, right? I mean, many of the examples Ivar showed is sort of
Einstein,
like you
can
can make
I
a
go
ball
home now?
hideous-looking dress.
You sound very tired
For
and
people who are building
intoxicated.
stuff out of
Maybe you should have a nap.
spare parts,
Yeah, probably.
trying to cut and paste existing products to make something new.
Hey,
I mean,
Einstein.
3D
Will
printers
robots
is an
take over the
amazing
world?
unprecedented tool. I mean, you can say we put a
You
camera
sound a
inside of a
little afraid
robot's
and
chest.
nervous.
Well,
Would you like to
for
play
that,
a
actually,
game?
we removed the chest
Sure,
piece,
why
we
not?
3D printed a new chest piece with a hole for the camera. Right? This is what turns the movie. We can resurrect it after.
Hello?
Hey there.
What's your name?
My name is Zoidstein.
Someone told him, must have said that to him. It said,
Where were you born?
I was born in Germany, but I live in Hong Kong.
so we're pretty
Say
bad
something
with
funny.
intelligence, but it does understand something, and you can't predict it.
Ha 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 ha.
So I have no idea what to do with that, actually.
If electricity comes from electrons, does morality come from morons?
Now, again, it doesn't really understand that joke, but it knows it's a joke, and it picked it out from some joke database somewhere.
What is 6 plus 7?
Now here, again, it's a bit of a trick. You can just
I
look
think
at
that's
Google or go from
13.
Alpha or somewhere and get the answer.
Alright.
What we're
What's
working on
6 divided by
is trying to
0?
understand what it's saying, which now it does a bit of the time and doesn't a lot of the time.
I heard that it's infinity.
So
Whoa!
came up with that. Probably
Why is
from
6 a phase 7?
knowledge sources that you can solve.
I guess it's because 7, 8, 9. Yeah. 7, 8, 9.
Some jokes goes a long way.
Good one. What's the meaning of life?
And I don't think there's a lot more in these.
Life lies at the intersection of many
There you go.
forces.
That's a pretty
Maybe
good
it's not-
answer. No one can argue.
What is death?
That used to be necessary for biological evolution.
I think we fed it all the
Because the
comment section
competition
from Ray
in a
Kurzweil's
constrained
website. They give that a high priority. So
ecosystem allowed a
it figures
limited
out what's
amount
an
of
appropriate way to synthesize
diversity
stuff from comments, various
as
features.
machines and other engineered life forms.
I mean, this is really just a
More
prototype
efficient.
experiment, and the goal
That
is to
will
use
be
the
less
open cloud
needed
system
and will be a
to
mere
make something that really
vestigial-
understands what it's talking about. And there's a lot involved there. I mean, to control a robot, you have to handle perception and action and thinking and get them all to work together. I mean, there's hundreds of different pieces. But then, the Apollo rocket had 1 million parts. And it's not the first complex machine that we've built. And in the end, once we're done, people are going to be forced to view the human brain as just another complex machine. And I mean, that doesn't mean there's no other aspect to human experience or no spiritual aspect to life, but it means that from the view of thinking, perceiving, and acting, we can view what happens in the brain as a very complex mechanical process. And the brain of these robots doesn't have to live in the robot. The brain largely will live on the cloud, and that's what I think of as a mind clouds. And that's an advantage that robots will have to people, because I have all this knowledge in my head. Ivar has all this knowledge in his head. Each of you has your own knowledge gained over your lifetime, and it's very slow and difficult for us to transfer that knowledge to one another, and most of it will vanish when we die and our bodies rot, right? Whereas if you're an AI, your mind can be up on the cloud. The minds of the other AIs are up on the cloud. You can actually port knowledge from one mind to another directly. Furthermore, you can copy yourself over and over again. So I think in the end, having isolated minds stuck in isolated bodies that live a certain time and expire is going to be viewed as an extremely obsolete way of experiencing the world, of processing information, of enjoying life in general. I mean, if you think about it, like right now, if a truck hits you, there's no backup copy. You're just gone. That's going to be viewed as very archaic at some point in time. And a guy like Albert Einstein, with a unique intuition and insight into physics, he's dead. That intuition in his mind is gone. That's going to be viewed as very bizarre, just as now we would think it's strange never to back up your files or to have a brilliant book and then burn all copies of it after 90 years, right? So the putting of minds in the cloud is a major step forward. And yeah, I'm kind of short on time here as well, so I'll go rapidly through the rest. But I think robotics is a classic application of AI. That's what everyone expects to see from science fiction movies, like robots marching down the street. And there's loads of great applications for that. I mean, elder care will be a very major one. And tutoring. Imagine having a robot tutor to help every kid with their homework, or ultimately to eliminate school and just give one-on-one instruction to children. And robot maids to clean your house, robot salespeople to go shopping for you and buy stuff, inspect things that the drone will deliver afterwards. So I think humanoid robots are going to be a tremendous industry. Just like now everyone has a dishwasher and a car and a house, everyone will have a bunch of different robot helpers to go around in the system with their life. And it will seem bizarre not to have had them. Just like now you have to think to remember what it was like not to have a mobile phone, right? Like if you want to meet someone somewhere, you got to plan in advance. I'll meet you at this place at about this time, and if they don't show up, then you got to go to a payphone and try to leave a message somewhere. We've almost forgotten what it was like, right? And what was it like before ATMs, right? I mean, I'm old enough to remember. You had to go to the bank once every month or something, budget how much cash you would need to buy stuff. I mean, before credit cards even. Not that long ago. Similarly, we won't be able to imagine what it was like not to have these service robots everywhere just doing annoying mechanical stuff for us, which now we waste our time and energy doing. But even though that's sort of the most visible and obvious, emotionally compelling instance of AI, actually the advent of AI isn't just that. It's happening everywhere behind the scenes. And one area I've been working in since I came to Hong Kong is applying AI to financial prediction. And I think that's an area where algorithms are going to take over everything in the next couple of decades. I mean, high-frequency trading, of course, it's not advanced AI, but it's already algorithms. No one can do anything that fast. No human can think that fast, right? But the next frontier will be AIs taking over longer scale investment and prediction, sort of CTA scale stuff. And pretty much any public market, pretty much all the information there in a developed country where there's not excessive insider trading, all the information is there online. I mean, it's just data sets online, it's SEC filings, it's financial news, it's chats and blogs and corporate reports, accounting fundamentals. All this stuff can be fed into an AI system, which can then make predictive judgments without emotional bias and incorporating more data than a human being can fit into their mind. And this is a number of funds. There's Cerebellum Capital in the U.S. Renaissance Technologies, the world's most successful hedge fund, has a huge number of AI researchers working for them. So we're starting a fund called IDEA based in Hong Kong, which should start trading in the next couple months. We've been paper trading for a while with decent results. Initially trading constituents of the S&P 500, then we'll do global macro stuff after that. But that's looking at price, volume, fundamentals, both macro and company specific, and looking at news, feed it all into an AI engine and try to predict, hey, will this stock's price go up or down in the next month or two? So looking at a pretty long scale of prediction. And all these AI's predictions go into a trading system that does capital allocation, risk management, and all the standard stuff. But I think, our fund may or may not succeed. I hope it does succeed, obviously. But regardless of that, there's going to be loads of people doing this in the next couple decades. All trading on the public markets will be AI driven in a decade, and then the next frontier after that will be private equity, but that will take even more intelligent AIs, because there everything isn't written down. There you'll need the service robots to go around and schmooze people and take them out to dinner and so forth, right? Maybe the AI will even pretend to get drunk in order to make the social interactions go better. I don't know. But for public markets, I think the writing is pretty clearly on the wall. Like, all these analysts sitting in investment banks are going to be useless in a decade from now, because an AI can just do those jobs better. And spitting out analyst reports, they're not such works of literature anyway, right? That's not that far from the time when an AI can just spit out the prose of an analyst report, to the extent that it's needed, because if it's AI's doing the trading, the analyst report can just be a data structure. It doesn't even need to be written. I mean, frankly, most of the analyst reports are wrong anyway, right? So you can almost replace them with a random generator. Right? Now, all this advance is exciting. It is also a bit frightening and disturbing to many people. Among them, my friend Hugo de Garis, who will be speaking next. But also, for example, Stephen Hawking, who somewhat ironically has come out saying AIs are going to end the human race. Now, of course, the reason he can speak is due to AI technology, but that doesn't contradict his point of view. Everything has both benefits and risks, and he's been quite public about this. So have some other famous people. I mean, Elon Musk, the Iron Man we've just heard about, has said AI researchers are summoning the demon, and once you get the demon out of the bottle, we all know you can't put it back. And Bill Gates has been more measured and reasonable in his proclamations, but he's also said, I mean, he's worried that AI, as it advances, may just advance so far it'll do away with the human race. Nick Bostrom, a philosopher at Oxford University, has written a book called Superintelligence, and this book lays out in fairly clear, boring academic prose his argument why superintelligence is likely to occur and is likely to eliminate humanity. Now, I don't especially believe that, but on the other hand, these guys aren't idiots, so certainly it's worth paying attention to their line of thinking. I mean, if you think about it, the AI doesn't have to be evil or malevolent. It just has to know that it's much smarter than us and think it's more important than we are. Eliezer Yudkowsky from the Machine Intelligence Research Institute in California puts it like this: the AI does not love you. The AI does not hate you, but he can use your molecules for something else. I mean, in a similar way, when we want to build a new building, how much do we worry about the ants who have raised their families in little holes under the ground where we're going to lay the foundation? I mean, we don't want to kill those ants. That's not why we want to build the building, right? On the other hand, neither do we go and pluck out each ant and, gracefully relocate it to a new hole somewhere else, right? We just mush them, right? We plow them down. And the fear is that AIs will be like that. Once they're 10,000 times smarter than us, I mean, they'll see us as, part of the dirt, just like we see ants as being. And I see some point to that. On the other hand, I think it doesn't go deep enough philosophically. I like the thinking of these guys, David Weinbaum and Victoris Vitas, at a place called the Global Brain Institute for University of Brussels. They have a nice paper on open-ended intelligence, which is available on archive.org. You can Google or Baidu for it. But they make the point that intelligence has been obsoleting itself since the very, very, very beginning of time, right? I mean, as soon as you had intelligence on Earth, it evolved, and that intelligence was gone, and new intelligence came. And I mean, human beings largely have replaced the great apes as the smartest intelligence. And if you showed a caveman modern society with all of everyone in Hong Kong walking around staring at their phone all day, right? I mean, the caveman would not recognize the average Hong Kongese citizen staring at their phone as a human being. I mean, they would think this is some sort of freakish mode of existence. We're wearing all these clothes. We sit in offices all day. We stare at these devices all the time. I mean, there's been an awful lot of change already, and the fact that our value system is going to be revolutionized going forward, and our bodies are going to be revolutionized going forward. I mean, this is it's nothing new, and we shouldn't think of it in terms of, is all that we hold dear going to be obsoleted? Because of course it is, but everything that was held dear 10,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago, an awful lot of that has been obsoleted as well. We need more to think about the nature of the change that's going to happen. I mean, I wrote a blog post around this recently, which may or may not be blocked here, but it can be found with effort, right? And I mean, one question to think about is, if you teach an AGI human values, will it really adopt them? So, I mean, something that Nick Bostrom worries about is you teach an AI to be nice to people, and it's really nice to everyone until it gets a little more powerful than people. Then all of a sudden it turns around and makes a synthetic virus that kills everyone, right? Or is that not very likely? I mean, personally, I think it's not very likely. I think if you're training a young AGI to get smarter and smarter, and you're training it to interact in an empathic way with people and manifest human values, the easiest way for it to do that will be to actually have those human values. I mean, just as when you teach a young kid to be nice, most of them actually do learn to embody human values. There are some sociopaths, though, and we want to learn how to rule out the, in my view, low odds outcome that the first AGIs are sociopaths, but I don't see why it's the most likely outcome. And after that, you have another question. Let's say you succeed in making an AGI that is both as smart as people and shares human values. Well, that AGI is going to rewrite its own source code. It's going to make itself smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter over time, right? And how is that direction going to feel to us human beings? Now, humans may also be making themselves smarter and smarter over time by plugging chips into our brains and whatnot, because after all, when all the neighbors' kids have chips in their brains and they're getting straight A's in school, I mean, do you want your kid to be the only retard in class without a chip in their brain? All the neighbors' kids can do long division and calculus just by thinking. If your kid doesn't have a chip in their brain, they've got to take out their computer and peck around with their fingers. No one's going to want that, right? So humans will be advancing in parallel with the AGIs advancing. And, how does that work? Will the AGIs advance much, much faster? Will there be some kind of harmony where the two are advancing together? I mean, there's a lot of questions there that we can't answer, and I often think it's much like a bunch of cavemen sitting in their cave right after having invented like fire and language. Or like, well, what will the future consequences of this new invention of language be? Now, this is interesting. Like we can talk about the mammoth we killed over there, right? And maybe my wife will find out what I was doing with that girl from the other cave, huh? But they're not going to foresee Facebook, differential calculus, SMS, James Joyce, right? I mean, you can only see so far ahead, and it's the same way for us now. Even though some very smart people think this is scary, there's little doubt in my mind it's going to happen. I mean, the economic benefit of AGI is just going to be too large. You're not going to stop it any more than the internet was stoppable once it became unleashed. I mean, you can try to control and direct it in certain ways, but the benefit of having AIs do the work that people now do is just going to be too great for people profiting from means of production, right? I mean, if the U.S. decided to ban AGI because someone decided it will have evil consequences, well, great, then the U.S. becomes a third world country, right? And if the U.S., China, and Europe banned it, then before long, Africa becomes the richest place in the world because they have AGIs to do the work that stupid humans are doing in all these countries that banned AGI. So it's unstoppable, and pretty much everyone in power sees that. So, I mean, you're going to see this advance happening faster and faster, and I think that's a good thing. And the last topic I'm going to address is one of the reasons I think it's a good thing is I don't want to be dead. And I mean, this is partly because, I mean, I'm not religious in any conventional sense. I don't think after I die I'm going to frolic in heaven with 70 virgins or whatever various religions say. I mean, I think that after I die, my body rots in the ground and is eaten by worms. And if You know, if my mind exists in some diffuse way afterwards, quite possible. I'd be happy if it's true, but I'd even rather have myself continue on in this form, or porting my mind into a robot. And that's, a dream that is, again, increasingly viewed as sane. Whereas 20 years ago, when I was 10 years old and I told people, I want to live forever, they just thought I was completely batshit crazy, right? And now, Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin are out there saying, yeah, we want to solve death. And Craig Venter, the guy who sequenced the human genome for the first time with Solara Genomics, he's founded a new company, Human Longevity Incorporated, aimed also curing death, right? And so that's, of course, Jun Wang, the founder of Beijing Genomics Institute in China, is interested in the same thing. So there's, all of a sudden, this has become mainstream. Now, this, however, is a very complicated problem. And my own intuition is that we're going to need the help of very advanced AI to convincingly cure death, aging, and disease. The human body is just an insanely complicated system. And it will take a long time for human biologists to sort out all the puzzles of all the different reasons that humans get old and die. If you can apply an AI to this, you're gonna have a lot more success. So I've done some work along these lines. We studied the DNA of special fruit flies that were evolved over 30 years to live 5 times as long as normal flies. So for 30 years, Dr. Michael Rose at University of California, Irvine, bred long-lived fruit flies with each other till he had a bunch of cages of flies that live 5 times as long as regular ones, right? And that's very cool. And then we studied their DNA. Why did these flies live so long? Based on understanding which genes make them live so long, we picked out a combination of herbs. You feed those herbs to a middle-aged fly, it will double its lifespan. Just what the world needs, longer-lived houseflies. It's great, right? I mean, next we can make long-lived mosquitoes. But, so some of the folks I work with on this packaged up a supplement for humans based on this, which some people report has very, very positive effects. So some people who are old and experiencing cognitive decline found this supplement helps them, and there's been some clinical trials to prove this. But supplements aren't what's going to cause us to live forever. But once you've identified the genes underlying longevity, there's new technologies such as CRISPR, CRISPR. If you haven't heard that, you can look it up. CRISPR-Cas9. These are molecules, you can put them in the body, they're enzymes, and they can edit your DNA. So you can inject that, and it will change your DNA to be different than it was. This is in the test tube and in animals now, but within a decade, this will be an approved medical therapy. So once you have that, you can figure out, okay, let's edit these genes to make me healthier and live longer. Actually inject something to edit those genes, right? The role of AI there is to figure out what genes to edit. So we're looking at the DNA of people who live 110 years or longer and figure out what are the differences in the genomic structure and activity in these people who live 110 years or longer. And when you can figure that out, which you do by applying AI to the DNA of a bunch of these very old people, once you can figure out the differences, then biologists are working out ways to edit our DNA to make it more like these guys who live over 110 years. So finally, what do I see as the next step? So I'm going to take a minute and tell you what I hope to be doing in the next few years of my life. I think about the next stages of AI by analogy to the space program. I mean, you had the V2 rocket, which showed that multi-stage rocketry could go into space. And once you saw that, the technical principles were clear. Then you had Sputnik, and once you had Sputnik, all of a sudden space was big, right? Then everyone knew that going into space was going to happen. Then the U.S. launched their space program. Russia doubled down on their space program. That led to Apollo, which ultimately will lead to starships and Elon Musk in an Iron Man suit flying through the galaxy and all sorts of amazing things. Now, where are we in AGI? I would say we're just approaching the V2 level, actually. Yeah, V1. Oh, that is a V1, but I meant the V2. So, yeah, all right. Yeah. Yeah, I think we're just about at that level now. We don't yet have the Sputnik of AGI, but we're very close to demonstrations that show we have the principles to make thinking machines. And thinking about that in terms of my own work, if we can get one of David Hanson's beautiful human-like robot heads to hold a conversation that isn't a combination of intelligence with smoke and mirrors, but is really just understanding every word and phrase it says in a simple conversation about its environment. I mean, it doesn't have to pass the Turing test and fully emulate human intelligence. It doesn't even have to be useful. It just has to, it looks at you, it smiles, and you say, hey, nice to see you. It's, hey, nice to see you again. I haven't seen you for a couple days now, right? Then it asks, well, when I last talked to you, you said you were going to Seoul. How was it? Just basic, everyday conversation. Do you want a cup of water? No, I don't drink water, stupid. I'm a robot. But basic understanding of itself and its environment. That's going to be an AGI Sputnik. Once you can demonstrate something like that, every major company, every government in the world is going to see like the era of AGI is dawning, and you're going to see many, many billions of dollars going into AGI, like you see now into semiconductors and neuroscience research and medical research. And I think we're in a position to do that not too long from now. I mean, prediction is always chancy, but I mean, I think if sufficient funding and attention goes into these things, we could be, say, 5 or 7 years away from having a robot that can really hold a conversation with full human understanding. Potentially less, potentially a bit more, but say 3 to 12 years if you want to put a confidence interval around it. And that's a long time in terms of funding and project planning, but not that long in terms of the scope of human history, right? And once you get there, then getting to superhuman AGI becomes mostly a matter of management and coordination. Because once you get to that point, billions of dollars going in, so many brilliant PhDs all over the world, people building brain chips, people making sensors of all sorts, the mind cloud integrating information from all over the world. It becomes a large-scale project, much like the Apollo project was largely a matter of proper management and coordination. So we're not too far off from this point. I mean, I'm 48 years old. I think if nothing tragic happens, I'm likely to see this within my lifetime. Ray Kurzweil is in his 60s, so he takes a lot of supplements. So hopefully they'll help, and then he can survive to see it also. But I think it's an extremely interesting time to be working on this stuff, and there are tremendous risks that you can think about, but the rewards are also amazing. I mean, think about it. If you had superhuman AIs that could map out every cell and molecule in your body, I mean, first of all, you could have a human version of yourself which never got sick, which didn't need to sleep, which only eats and drinks when it wants to, right? And you could have a jetpack to fly around in the air, direct link to computers in your brain. Additionally, you could copy your mind out of your brain into a computer substrate, play all day in virtual worlds, go out into outer space without needing air and so forth. I mean, there's amazing possibilities. And imagine doubling your IQ every year. 10 years later, you're 1,000 times smarter, but you can feel yourself become smarter and smarter. As Hugo likes to say, you're building, in a sense, gods and becoming gods. And that's sounds like a far-out vision, but our life now would have seemed far out to cavemen or even people 200 years ago. And the beauty of exponential progress, as Ivar was outlining, is that what took a few hundred years to happen before now may take a few dozen years or even just a couple years. And I've followed in the tradition of the previous speaker by taking longer than I was supposed to. So we have exponentially increasing talks, actually. But I'm finished now, and I guess we'll have I am done. Yeah, I'm done. That's my last slide. Next comes the singularity. Huh?
Are you really done now? Because we
Yeah, I'm done.